Well, the sounds you just heard were those of an E1 class locomotive, number 31019, which is the very engine that I'm hoping to build a model of as part of the Bexhill West project. Now, I was hoping that today's video would be an opportunity to show you the progress I've been making on the model. However, the progress has all been much the same as you've already seen, just more track laying and ballasting and point rodding and that sort of thing. So it seemed no point in having a look at that today, but maybe next week's video we'll be able to include some of that. But what we are going to look at today is the refreshment room building, which I've been doing some work on and made quite a big error on. So we'll have a look at my mistakes there. And then we'll get into unboxing a kit for an E1 class locomotive, which I'm going to, I think, use as part of the project. So let's get started. First up today, I'd like to talk about this building. Now, this was the refreshment room, gentleman's toilet, and the porters and lamp room at Bexhill West, and this sat sort of perpendicular to the main station building. In fact, the running lines sort of came in like so, and the trains terminated, and then you could hop off and visit the gents or get a cup of tea. And I've spent an awful lot of time studying photographs and working sizes out, and I reckon this is pretty accurate. That is to say, the floor plan and the elevations are not too bad. And I've had all sorts of things to consider, and I've mentioned this before. There's a little hole in the wall there, and you might be able to see a little padstone beneath it, and that's where the sort of the station concourse canopy is going to fit onto there. So I was quite happy with all of this as it had been progressing. But there is a real problem sometimes with simply looking at photographs and working just from those, and I've made a bit of a mistake. You see, I've made the roof too big, and it's complicated. In my defence, it's a hipped roof, and most photographs of it are taken sort of at an angle sort of towards the hips, and it isn't that easy to look at and necessarily calculate the roof pitch. Well, I thought I'd got the roof pitch correct. As it happens, I haven't. I've made it too steep. And so once I've got this on the computer screen and I'm drawing these bits and I've mistakenly got the pitch wrong, I then start to base the massing of the various elements, such as this impressive, I'm not sure what that was, a sort of like a belfry kind of thing, and its support structure. I've kind of got the massing of those more or less right. In fact, this is in hindsight, this top piece is a little bit too big, but the massing of the rest of these components is about right. But of course, it wasn't until I built the thing and took a couple of photographs and then looked at the photographs of my model against photographs of the real thing that I realised that the pitch of this roof was totally wrong. So I'm going to have to remake all of this, sadly, drop the pitch by about 5 degrees, which will have the effect of reducing the size of this pedestal for this top piece. I really don't know what that is. I'm going to call it a belfry, but I don't know what it is. So it will reduce the mass of this, and then consequently this thing can then reduce in size, and the whole thing won't look quite so ridiculous. This all looked fine on a computer screen, but it wasn't until I had it sort of fleshed out that this problem became apparent. So this isn't the end of the world, and in fact this is why I kind of take the model to this stage, and it will stay at this stage for a while now until I start to finally assemble Bexhill West, and in doing so it allows me to take these photographs and see what bits are wrong. But I thought I'd show you this anyway. It's interesting. It's always good to see a failure, because we sort of learn from our mistakes, don't we? You get an idea of the slates, how they're going to look. These of course will all be painted. And something else I like to do when I'm laser cutting these parts is I engrave lines to help me get these courses of slates to kind of work out nicely. So that's the roof structure. It's hollow inside, when I make the second version of this, it too will be hollow, and I'll have lighting and stuff up inside there. I'm even thinking about installing a little sound chip so that this can play some station announcements, or I don't know, the sounds of eggs frying in the refreshment room maybe. You can see some little holes here. These are for magnets, which will correspond with similar magnets here, so that hopefully this thing will just drop on and kind of self-center. Now the structure itself is fairly open, and what I will do, there are two impressive chimneys on the top, which they've got some more detail and stuff to go on, but on the walls below where these chimneys are, I will install fireplaces and little wood burning stoves, so you'll be able to see those, and they'll probably have LEDs inside. I also plan somewhere on here to fit a camera, so I'm thinking I'll use something like a webcam out of a computer laptop, and that will probably have all its electronics mounted up here, and it will sort of hang down. It might be on a little hinge, so I can just flap it down, and I can get a video out from the refreshment room of a train arriving. I thought that would be quite good fun and relatively simple to organise. The gents' toilets this was I think open air here, so I think we'll put a urinal in there so you can see what's going on. There you go, these window frames, they're just done in my usual style. There's a little bit of masking tape in here holding these in at the moment, but same as usual. Two layers laser cut to reveal the sort of the vertical sliding sash detail, and when they're mounted in, I think they're going to look quite good. And as I've shown before, there's little holes on here. These will have magnets so that the station notices and displays and things will just kind of magnetically attach to the front wall, and I can swap those out depending on what era I want to depict when I'm taking pictures of all of this. So there you go, that's the refreshment room. Coming along, there's been quite a lot of work involved in this so far, but not entirely successfully, as I've just described. So this bit will all be remade, so I guess really I ought to just be showing you this, which doesn't look quite so good. But that will all be done, and I think the whole job will be better for having made the mistake and improving it. So moving on, I thought I'd give an update on my progress with my ambition to build a model of an E1 class locomotive to use at Bexhill West. Regular viewers will know that I want to build a particular example of this class. In fact, I want to build number 31019, which pulled the Rother Valley Rail Tour to Bexhill West in October 1958. But rather than build an E1 first of all, which was an improved E-class, I thought I'd build the E-class and then kind of make its Mark II sibling. And I've showed previously some of my CAD work for that, and I've begun by 3D printing some sort of test pieces for that. However, when I began this project, I didn't realise that it's possible to buy a kit for an E1 class. So I'm going to carry on with my plan to build the E-class, but I thought I'd have a go at doing the E1 from a kit. And that way I can kind of cover scratch building and kit building and sort of see what's involved. And then have two engines, the same sort of thing that I can compare and contrast at the end of the day. So the E-class was typical Wainwright fashion, quite an elegant engine in my opinion, with these lovely curved splashers and a nice curved cab side. The E1 is basically the same thing, except the running board or platform is extended upwards, I guess to give improved access to oiling the coupling rods. But one of the main differences between the two was the fact that the E-Class had slide valves, whereas the E1 had piston valves, and so because of that the boiler had to be raised by 7 inches. So we've got a bit more sort of clear air between the running board and the boiler barrel, which means the innards should be more visible. If you imagine stood on a platform, we'd be able to look in there and see the valve gear. Now, because the boiler was raised, it meant some changes to the spectacle plate. Now, I have touched on this before. The E1 class had, in my opinion, really quite ugly windows or in the front of it, really badly designed in my view, not very attractive at all. And when Monsell rebuilt them as the E1, I think he's done an even worse job. I mean, these look terrible, but there we go, that's what history dictates we must go with. Another detail difference between the two is that the smoke box door on the E-Class is slightly smaller and is fastened with a central dart, whereas the E1 class is a much larger door and is fastened with 6 sort of dog clamps around the perimeter. I'm guessing that with the larger door, maybe that tended to move a bit, maybe in the heating and cooling cycles of lighting the fire, I don't know, and perhaps it was difficult to hold a vacuum around the seal around the door, so that's why it had more clamps. I don't really know, but anyway, those are the main differences between the two. So it would be nice to build this one from the kit and then scratch build this one and compare the two and see how well I get on. So with that in mind, I bought a kit which I have here. It's a DJH kit. Now I understand this is one of their sort of older models, and if what I've read online is true, it can be a little bit crude in places. But I thought today I'd unbox it and I'd show you my first thoughts, some of the challenges which I anticipate experiencing in putting this thing together, and a couple of solutions that I've come up with which hopefully will enable me to do a better job. So let's get into that. So upon opening the box, the first thing that we're presented with here is some instructions which sort of run through preparing the parts. There's a brief history of the engines, some construction notes, and some quite rudimentary drawings that take us through what's what, but I think that's all fairly straightforward. I don't anticipate any problems with those. Now the first item I wanted to look at in detail is the casting for, I'm not sure what to call this really. It's, to my mind, it's the running board, but I think they call it the chassis. And of course it's not really a chassis, so I'm not sure quite what the correct term is. But anyway, this piece which forms well, let's call it the chassis. This is the bit to which everything else attaches, and it's a white metal casting, and this one out of the box is slightly distorted. And a concern of mine was, how am I going to keep this dead flat and true? I can tweak it and bend it back into shape, but keeping it that way as I build the thing, I anticipate being a bit of a problem. So to that end, I've built myself a little jig. So it's a base plate with 4 little clamps and a panel which clips in here. Now something I noticed on this casting, there are some holes which need to be drilled out and cleaned up for various screws which hold different parts of this model together. So I thought I could utilise those. So this can sit on this jig and I can screw through into the wooden jig itself and help hold this nice and flat. Now I don't know if you can see there, you can just maybe, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but there's a slight bend in here, so I won't rely upon the screws to hold this flat, but hopefully once I've tweaked it and got it nice and true, I'll be able to secure it onto this base, and it should stay that way whilst I build the rest of it. Okay, so the next, well, let's move this piece over here for now. The next exciting bits out of the box are the 2 castings which make up the boiler and the smoke box. And these are going to need a little bit of work because the fit of them is not brilliant, but I think it's something that can be cleaned up reasonably well. And of course these are going to require soldering together, and as you can see they're quite tricky to hold, so I need to come up with a solution for that. And my solution was to make another jig. So it uses the same platform as the previous one. And what I've done here is created like a little cradle into which these parts will sit. So I'm hoping that as I fettle these castings and get a reasonably good fit on them, I'll be able to drop them into here, and they should hold the parts for me quite nicely. I can get a clamp on and, you know, do other bits and pieces, but they're basically going to hold these bits together. Whilst I work on them, I'll obviously solder the parts together. I shall have to use probably quite a bit of solder to fill various gaps, but I'm hoping that that's going to help me to work on this thing. Now, I originally designed this to hold this upside down, but it occurred to me that's not really going to help very much when it comes to working on it from the top. So to that end, I made another jig, which is here. And hopefully you can see just by looking at this how this is going to work. This should enable me to take these parts and drop them in to hold it the other way up, so that when this is all assembled I can work on that top joint, and should help me hold it all together and keep this thing quite nice, stop it rolling around the bench, and hopefully look after it, so that once I've got this piece assembled and I'm happy with it, I can then whip this jig away, return the previous one, and hopefully that's going to just do a nicer job for me in holding this all together. Now there's a second piece to this jig which I've not shown, which I will show in a future video, which is like a, I don't know how to describe it, like a sliding base upon which this can slide against a fixed fence. And attached to that fixed fence is an adjustable pointer that I can use to take measurements along this, so I can kind of, when I come to put the cab on, I can use it to make sure that the cab is nice and central. And the pointer will fit on a track on the other side, and so hopefully I can use it just to make sure everything's central. I don't want things like the chimney, for example, to go on slightly askew, so I thought anything I can do to help me maintain some sort of order as this goes together would be a good idea. I mean, you can see balancing these bits are terrible, so I think this is what made me think I need a jig for this. So I've probably invested, I don't know, an hour in designing this thing and a few minutes cutting the bits out. I think that was time well spent in helping me to come up with something that's going to enable this to go together a bit more sensibly. So there we go. That's the first 3 castings and the jigs which I've prepared to help me put those together. Well, that really was the main meat of this video. The rest of this sort of unboxing is probably not of much interest. There's some wheels. I don't know if I'm going to use those ones or not. Some screws, some plates which assemble to make the motor and gearbox arrangement in the instructions, but I think I'm going to do something slightly different with the motor, so we'll come on to that. Now, a word or two about the coupling rods. These are quite nice etches. Quite pleased with the quality of those. However, something to bear in mind is that they are they're really designed for the D1 class rather than the E1. So, if you recall, this is a kit to build a D1/E1, and really externally they look very, very similar. The E1 class, however, has a 6-inch longer wheelbase between the driving wheels. So this kit is obviously designed on the D1 wheelbase, whereas as I say, the E1 was 6 inches longer, which is 2mm. So I've got a bit of a decision to make here, and it may well be that I throw these away and make my own, which will be 2mm longer. We'll see how the rest of the kit scales out to decide whether or not that's worthwhile. So there's another pack of castings. These all seem, well, fair enough. I think this is the backhead casting. I don't know if you'll be able to see that through the polythene packaging, but I think the design of that is wrong. I need to do some more research, but I think that's wrong. So when I design the backhead for my 3D printed version, I will probably make 2 of them and replace this casting. In fact, what I may well do is, when I finalise my ideas for the E-Class, I may well take a mould off of this and produce this in white metal. And it may well be that I kind of make 2 boilers, change the chimneys. This chimney's too long, by the way, but make the chimney and the dome as separate castings, and then I could use my E-Class design boiler for the E1, which would enable me to get that backhead correct. But anyway, that's something else. But on the whole, I'm quite pleased with those castings. There's a few interesting bits and pieces. The guard irons are white metal. I can't imagine those lasting 5 minutes before they get bent, so I'll probably replace those. What else have we got? Oh, this was my favourite pack of bits and pieces, only because I noticed there was a bucket. I thought that was quite nice. Bucket, a couple of lamps, various bits and pieces, and castings for the dome and the chimney, which they're okay. I might make some replacements though for those. And then finally in the kit are the parts to construct the tender. Now if I come back, I've got some drawings here of the tender. So this view shows the tender as originally fitted to the E-Class, and then they were rebuilt for the E1s and for the D1s as well, for that matter. And they're basically the same sort of thing. This one has additional coal rails on the top, but the main thing, and I need to check this, was that the footplate was widened. So if we have a look here, I don't know if you can see this, the footplate actually was widened on the E1s under the cab, and that extra width continued onto the front of the tender. So just in this area it was widened, so it'd be interesting to see if, yes it is, on the footplate casting supplied for the model it also has that widening, so that's good. And then what else have we got? So we've got some etched brass frames for, in fact they're not, are they etched? Yes they are, they're etched frames for the locomotive. And looking at these, it's a bit puzzling. Hopefully you can see they don't actually extend forwards over the bogie. They've kind of cheated here, whereas the frame should extend right to the front of the engine. They've kind of stopped it short, no doubt to let the front bogie articulate. I'm not sure that's really good enough, so I may end up remaking those. Certainly my design for my E-Class had full frames along the length, so that'll be another interesting comparison we can make as we move forward. And then what else have we got in here? Some bits of wire. and stuff for the handrails and the pickups and what have you. So there you go, that's what you get for your money with a DJH kit for the D1 stroke E1 class. And it's all okay. I've maybe been a bit critical. We must remember that this is an older design of kit, so I'm quite certain that their newer designs are probably a little better finessed than this one. But looking through these bits, it's given me lots of ideas of things that I could maybe improve, certainly on this kit, but also when I come to scratch build my E-Class. So I hope that unboxing has been interesting. Now then, I realised upon reviewing the footage of that little unboxing that I may have come across as being quite critical. There certainly seem to be lots of bits that I've said I'm going to modify, or I might use, or I might remake. And that wasn't really intended as a criticism of the kit. I think the kit itself is great. I think it's going to be really good fun to put together, and I'm going to enjoy making the modifications. And really that's the joy of making stuff oneself. We can do our own thing and experiment, and you know, there's nothing to lose. So please don't take those comments as negative of the kit. I think the kit's great, and I look forward to building it. So hopefully next time I will be able to show some footage of the more general progress I've made at Bexhill West. It's quite an effort getting it all set up, only really because I'm quite limited for space where I'm filming this, so I have to move a few bits and pieces around, but hopefully I'll be able to get that set up for the next video. And I may even include a little bit of footage of a random side project, which is to make quite a famous little boat for a friend of mine, so we may well see a little bit of that as well. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Cheerio.